The harsh winter wind whistled through the cracks of Madeline Cooper's weathered cabin as she tucked her threadbare blanket tighter around her shoulders, listening to the soft breathing of her 3 children asleep on the straw mattress in the corner. Widow at 26, mother of 3, and owner of nothing but debts in Cottonwood Springs, Colorado. 1878, her life had become a desperate struggle for survival since Thomas had been killed in that mining accident 14 months ago. Morning came too quickly, pale sunlight filtering through the grimy window as Madeline stirred a pot of thin oatmeal over the small fire. "Mama, do we have to go to school today?" 8-year-old Sarah asked, her small fingers working to braid her younger sister Emma's hair. "Yes, sweetheart." "Education is something no one can take from you," Madeline replied, ladling the meager breakfast into chipped bowls. Her eldest, 10-year-old James, sat quietly, dark circles under his eyes from the hours he spent helping at the livery stable after school for pennies a day. "The Thornton girls said our clothes smell like dirt," Emma whispered, her 5-year-old face pinched with worry. "And Billy Porter said we're poor as church mice." Madeline knelt before her daughter, smoothing her faded cotton dress. "We may not have much, but we have each other, and that makes us richer than they'll ever know." The children trudged off to school while Madeline headed to Mrs. Sullivan's laundry service, where she worked from sunrise to sunset, washing the clothes of Cottonwood Springs' more fortunate citizens. Her hands were raw and cracked from lye soap and hot water, but the $3 a week kept food on the table barely. That afternoon, a commotion outside the laundry drew Madeline to the window. Her heart sank as she saw James, his lip bloodied, shirt torn, standing defiantly while 2 larger boys taunted him. "Look at the beggar boy, wears his dead pa's cut-down clothes," one jeered. "Probably ain't even got a penny for candy," the other added. Madeline rushed outside, wiping her hands on her apron. "James." Before she could reach her son, a tall figure stepped between the boys. The stranger wore dusty riding clothes, a wide-brimmed hat shadowing piercing blue eyes in a sun-weathered face. A gleaming star was pinned to his leather vest. "That'll be enough," the man said, his voice quiet but carrying an undeniable authority. The bullies stepped back, suddenly wary. "Marshal," one of them mumbled. "You boys find somewhere else to be," the man said. When they hesitated, his gaze hardened. "Now." They scattered like quail, and the stranger turned to James, kneeling to meet the boy's eyes. "You all right, son?" James nodded, swiping at the blood on his lip. "What's your name?" the stranger asked. "James Cooper, sir." The man smiled, the expression transforming his stern face. "Cooper. Good, strong name." He glanced up as Madeline approached. "These your children, madam, my son," Madeline said, pulling James close. "Thank you for intervening, Marshal." "Nathaniel Reeves," he replied, standing and tipping his hat. "Just arrived in town yesterday." Emma and Sarah appeared from behind the laundry, clutching each other's hands, eyes wide at the imposing figure of the lawman. "And who might these young ladies be?" Nathaniel asked, his voice gentling. "I'm Sarah and this is Emma," Sarah said, stepping forward bravely. "Those boys were being mean to James again because we're poor." Madeline flushed with embarrassment, but Nathaniel's expression remained kind as he considered the children. "Poor," he said thoughtfully, looking from one child to the next. "I don't see poor children. I see a boy brave enough to stand up to bullies, and 2 girls with enough courage to come to his aid." He knelt again, his gaze encompassing all 3 children. "Seems to me they're rich in ways that matter. Rich in courage, rich in character." He glanced up at Madeline, something warming in his blue eyes. "Rich in their mama's name, I'd say." Emma's face brightened. "Did you hear that, James? The marshal says we're rich," Nathaniel chuckled, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out 3 small, polished stones, 1 blue, 1 green, 1 amber. "Where I come from, we believe these bring good fortune. 1 for each of you." The children accepted the gifts with wondering faces, and Madeline felt a strange flutter in her chest at the kindness in this stranger's eyes. "Mrs. Cooper," Nathaniel said, "I'd be obliged if you and your children would join me for supper this evening. New in town as I am, I could use some friendly faces." "We couldn't impose," Madeline began. "Please, Mama," Sarah pleaded. Madeline hesitated, aware of her worn dress and calloused hands. That's very kind, Marshal, but it's Nathaniel, please, and it's no imposition. 6 o'clock at the hotel dining room. His eyes held hers, and something in them made it impossible to refuse. Thank you, she said finally. We'll be there. As Nathaniel tipped his hat again and strode away, Madeline felt something she hadn't experienced since Thomas died, a tiny spark of hope. At precisely 6 o'clock, Madeline and her freshly scrubbed children entered the hotel dining room. She'd done her best with their appearance, mending James's shirt, retying the ribbons in the girl's hair, and changing into her one good dress, faded blue calico that had once been festive but now showed its age in frayed cuffs and a twice-mended hem. Nathaniel rose from a corner table when they entered, and Madeline was struck by his transformation. Gone was the dust-covered lawman. In his place stood a gentleman in a clean white shirt and dark vest, his brown hair neatly combed, though a rebellious lock fell across his forehead. Mrs. Cooper, he said, pulling out a chair for her. Thank you for coming. The dining room was not crowded, but Madeline felt the stares of the other patrons, the banker and his wife, the mercantile owner. People who knew her as the woman who washed their linens, not as a dinner companion. Nathaniel seemed oblivious to the attention as he helped the children into their seats and asked them about their day. When the waiter approached, Madeline tensed, but Nathaniel ordered for all of them roast beef, potatoes, green beans, and apple pie for dessert, as if dining with a laundress and her children was the most natural thing in the world. How long have you been in Cottonwood Springs, Mrs. Cooper? Nathaniel asked as they ate. 5 years, Madeline replied. Thomas, my husband, brought us here when the silver mine opened. He died last year in a cave-in. Nathaniel's eyes softened. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. Madeline looked down at her plate. It's been difficult. Mama works real hard, James said suddenly. She does washing all day and sewing at night. She hardly ever sleeps. Nathaniel's gaze returned to Madeline, appraising. Is that so? She flushed. We manage. The marshal gave us magic stones, Emma announced, changing the subject as she pulled her green stone from her pocket. They're not magic, silly, Sarah corrected. They're good luck stones. Indeed they are, Nathaniel said solemnly. My grandfather gave me my first one when I was about your age, James. Where are you from, Marshal? Madeline asked. Originally Montana Territory. My father ran cattle there. His eyes took on a distant look. I've been wearing this badge for 8 years now, moving where I'm needed. And you're needed in Cottonwood Springs. Madeline couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. Their town was generally peaceful. Mayor Thornton seems to think so. There's been trouble with rustlers in the valley and the stage was robbed twice last month. He smiled. But enough about that. Tell me about yourselves. For the next hour, Madeline watched in amazement as Nathaniel drew her children out, listening with genuine interest to James's ambitions to be a horse trainer, Sarah's desire to be a teacher, and Emma's detailed description of her rag doll's wardrobe. He spoke to them as people, not as poor children to be pitied, and by the time dessert arrived, all three were glowing with the attention. As they walked back to their cabin in the fading light, Emma slipped her hand into Madeline's. I like the marshal, Mama. He makes me feel important. Me too, Sarah agreed. And he said we're rich. Madeline smiled, though her heart was troubled. Nathaniel Reeves's kindness was like water to parched earth, but she knew better than to expect it to continue. Men like him, educated, confident, handsome, didn't truly see women like her, worn down by work and worry. Don't get too attached, she cautioned softly. The marshal is just being kind. But even as she spoke the words, she felt the warmth of Nathaniel's gaze lingering like a physical touch, and wondered if perhaps there was something more in those blue eyes than simple kindness. The next morning, Madeline rose before dawn as usual, stoking the small fire and preparing breakfast. A knock at the door startled her. No one ever called this early. She opened it to find Nathaniel, already dressed in his marshal's clothes, holding a basket covered with a checkered cloth. Good morning, he said. Thought you might be able to use these. He handed her the basket, which contained fresh eggs, a loaf of bread, a jar of preserves, and a small sack of coffee. Marshal, I can't accept, just being neighborly, he interrupted. And it's still Nathaniel, please. Before she could protest further, the children appeared, their faces lighting up at the sight of him. Marshal Reeves, Emma cried, running forward. Nathaniel caught her, swinging her into his arms with practiced ease. Good morning, Miss Emma. Ready for school today? Yes, sir. I'm going to show everyone my special stone. Madeline opened her mouth to refuse the food again, but James caught her eye and shook his head slightly. Pride was fine, his look seemed to say, but not at the expense of hungry siblings. Thank you, she said instead. Would you like to join us for breakfast? Nathaniel stayed only long enough for a cup of coffee, explaining that he needed to make his morning rounds, but he promised to see them again soon. As the children walked to school, their step was lighter, their faces brighter than Madeline had seen in months. Over the next few weeks, Nathaniel became a regular presence in their lives. He escorted the children to school on his way to the marshal's office, stopped by the laundry to check on Madeline during his rounds, and often appeared at their cabin in the evening with small gifts: a book for James, hair ribbons for the girls, a pot of honey for Madeline. The people of Cottonwood Springs noticed. Madeline heard the whispers, saw the speculative glances, felt the change in how she was treated. Mrs. Sullivan gave her extra hours at the laundry. The mercantile owner extended credit. The banker's wife stopped her on the street to ask about the children. Marshal Reeves speaks very highly of your son, James, the woman said. Says he has a way with horses. My husband might have a position for him at our stable this summer. Madeline thanked her, wondering at this sudden interest from people who had previously looked through her as if she were invisible. One evening in late March, after the children were asleep, Nathaniel and Madeline sat on the small porch of her cabin. The night was cool but not cold, the first hint of spring softening the mountain air. The children seem happier, Nathaniel observed. Not just yours, the town children. No more bullying that I've seen. That's your doing, Madeline said. Ever since you told mine they were rich in character, they've carried themselves differently. And after you had that talk with the Thornton and Porter boys, Nathaniel chuckled. Amazing what mucking out stalls for a week can teach about respecting others. Madeline studied his profile in the moonlight. Why are you doing this, Nathaniel, taking such an interest in us? He was silent for a long moment. When I first saw your boy standing up to those bullies, it reminded me of myself at his age. My father died when I was 12. Left my mother with 4 children and a mountain of debt. He turned to face her. A man in our town, the sheriff, he took an interest in us, made sure we had what we needed, taught me to ride and shoot, gave me my first job. Is that why you became a lawman? Nathaniel nodded. I wanted to do for others what Sheriff Bannon did for us. He hesitated. But with your family, it's different. Different how? His hand found hers in the darkness, warm and calloused. I admire you, Madeline, your strength, your determination. The way you've held your family together against all odds. Madeline's heart quickened at his touch, but she pulled her hand away. I'm a laundress with 3 children and a leaky roof, Nathaniel. I have nothing to offer a man like you, a man like me. His voice held a note of amusement. And what kind of man do you think I am? Respected, educated, you could have any woman in town. I don't want any woman in town. His voice dropped lower. I want to know if I might call on you properly, Madeline Cooper. She stared at him, unable to believe what she was hearing. People will talk. People already talk. Let them. The mayor won't approve. I don't work for the mayor. I work for the territorial authority. Madeline stood, wrapping her arms around herself. Nathaniel, I can't. I won't be an object of charity. He rose as well, his height making her tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Is that what you think this is? Charity? What else could it be? In answer, Nathaniel stepped closer, one hand coming up to cup her cheek. This, he said softly, and bent to press his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, questioning, and over almost before it began. But it left Madeline breathless, her pulse racing like a wild thing in her veins. I'll call on you tomorrow evening, Nathaniel said, his voice rough. If you'll allow it. Unable to speak, Madeline nodded. He smiled, brushing his thumb across her cheekbone before stepping back and disappearing into the night. Alone on the porch, Madeline touched her fingers to her lips, wondering if she was dreaming. Surely a man like Nathaniel Reeves couldn't truly be interested in her. Yet the warmth of his kiss lingered, as real as the stars overhead. For the first time since Thomas died, Madeline allowed herself to imagine a different future, one where she wasn't alone. where her children had a father figure, where love might be possible again. The thought was as frightening as it was exhilarating. She went inside, checking on her sleeping children. In the pale moonlight streaming through the window, she could see James's features relaxing into boyhood again, the worry lines smoothing from his brow. Sarah's arm was flung protectively over Emma, the two girls nestled together like puppies. "What would you think," she whispered, "if Marshal Reeves became more than a friend to us?" As if in answer, Emma stirred and murmured in her sleep, "Rich in Mama's name." Madeline smiled, her heart full. Whatever happened with Nathaniel, her children were indeed rich in the things that mattered most. And perhaps, just perhaps, there was room in their lives for more riches still. True to his word, Nathaniel called on Madeline the following evening. James opened the door, his face serious as he greeted the marshal. "Good evening, Marshal Reeves," he said formally. "Please come in." Nathaniel entered, hat in hand, and Madeline saw him with fresh eyes, tall and strong in his clean shirt and vest, a small bunch of wildflowers in his free hand. The first blooms of spring, she realized, touched by the gesture. "These are for you," he said, offering the flowers. "Thank you." Madeline took them, inhaling their subtle fragrance. "I'll put them in water." As she arranged the flowers in her only vase, a chipped porcelain piece, salvaged from her mother's belongings, she listened to Nathaniel talking with her children. He had brought a small wooden horse for James, carved by his own hand, he explained, and simple paper dolls for the girls that he'd purchased from the mercantile. "Marshal," Sarah asked, her voice carrying to where Madeline stood, "are you courting our mama?" Madeline froze, mortified by her daughter's directness, but Nathaniel's answer came without hesitation. "If she'll allow it, yes, I am." "Good," Sarah declared. "She smiles more when you're here." Madeline returned to the main room, her cheeks warm. "Children, it's time for bed." There were the usual protests, but Nathaniel backed her authority, and soon the children were tucked away behind the curtain that separated their sleeping area from the main room. The cabin suddenly seemed smaller with just the two of them, and Madeline gestured awkwardly to the rough wooden chairs by the fireplace. "Would you like some tea? Thank you." As she prepared it, Madeline was acutely aware of Nathaniel's eyes on her. When she handed him the cup, their fingers brushed, and the same spark she'd felt during their kiss flared between them. "I meant what I said to Sarah," Nathaniel said quietly. "I would like to court you properly, Madeline." She sat across from him, cradling her own cup. "Why me? There must be a dozen eligible women in town who would welcome your attention. None like you." His gaze was steady. "None who have shown such courage and determination. None who make me feel the way you do. And how is that? Like I've found something I didn't even know I was looking for." He set his cup down. "I've been a lawman for 8 years, moving from town to town, never stayed anywhere more than a year or two, never found a reason to. And now I'm thinking I might have found a reason to put down roots." Madeline's heart stuttered. "Nathaniel, I have 3 children." "I know, they're wonderful. I'm a widow with debts, I'm aware. I work as a laundress." His smile deepened. "And you're excellent at it, from what I hear. Mrs. Sullivan says you're the most reliable worker she's ever had." Madeline shook her head, bewildered by his persistence. "Most men want a younger woman, one without the complications I bring." "I'm not most men," Nathaniel said simply. "And at 32, I'm hardly looking for a child bride." He leaned forward. "I've lived enough to know what matters, Madeline. I've seen enough darkness to recognize light when I find it." Before she could respond, a noise from outside caught their attention, horses approaching, multiple riders by the sound. Nathaniel was on his feet instantly, his hand moving to the gun at his hip. "Stay here," he ordered, his voice changing from tender to commanding in an instant. He moved to the door, opening it cautiously. Madeline heard men's voices, one she recognized as Mayor Thornton's. "Marshal," the mayor called. "Need your help. Stage was hit again about 5 miles south. Driver's wounded." "Be right there," Nathaniel replied. He turned back to Madeline, his expression apologetic. "I have to go. I understand." He crossed to her in 2 strides, taking her hand. "We'll continue this conversation soon." Then he was gone, leaving Madeline with the lingering warmth of his touch and a head full of conflicting emotions. The next morning brought news that spread through town like wildfire. Marshal Reeves and a posse had tracked the stage robbers to their hideout in an abandoned mine shaft and engaged in a fierce gun battle. 2 of the outlaws had been killed, 3 captured, but not before one of them had managed to get off a shot that grazed Nathaniel's temple. Madeline heard the news from Mrs. Sullivan, who reported it with obvious relish. They brought him back to Doc Miller's. Bleeding something awful, they say, but conscious, refused to let them put him to bed until he'd seen the prisoners safely locked up. Madeline's hands shook as she continued scrubbing the sheets she was washing. Will he be all right? Doc says so, just needs rest, Mrs. Sullivan gave her a knowing look. Might do him good to have someone look in on him. When her work was finished, Madeline found herself walking toward the doctor's small office at the edge of town. She told herself it was only neighborly concern, but the rapid beating of her heart suggested otherwise. Dr. Miller looked up from his desk when she entered. Mrs. Cooper, what can I do for you? I heard about Marshal Reeves. I wanted to see how he's doing. The doctor's expression softened. He's resting in the back room. Stubborn as a mule, that one. Wouldn't take laudanum for the pain, insisted he needed to keep his wits about him. He gestured toward a door. You can look in on him if you like. Might do him good to see a friendly face. Madeline hesitated, suddenly unsure, but the doctor was already returning to his paperwork. Taking a deep breath, she knocked softly on the indicated door. Come in, Nathaniel's voice called. She entered to find him propped up on a narrow bed, a white bandage wrapped around his head. Despite his injury, his eyes brightened when he saw her. Madeline, this is a pleasant surprise. I heard what happened, she said, moving to stand beside the bed. Are you all right? Just a scratch. Doc's being overcautious keeping me here. Madeline frowned, noting the pallor beneath his tan and the lines of pain around his eyes. You could have been killed. Part of the job. He reached for her hand. But I'm touched by your concern. She allowed him to take her hand, fighting the urge to smooth back the lock of hair that had fallen across his forehead. The whole town's talking about it. They're saying you're a hero, Nathaniel grimaced. I was just doing my duty. The real heroes are the men who rode with me. His expression grew serious. One of the outlaws we captured, he says there's more to this than just stage robberies, claims someone in town is behind it all. Who, he wouldn't say. Afraid, I think. Nathaniel sighed. I need to get back out there, find out what's really going on. You need to rest and heal first, Madeline insisted, surprising herself with her vehemence. Nathaniel's eyes searched hers. Does this mean you care what happens to me, Mrs. Cooper? Despite her worry, Madeline found herself smiling. Perhaps I do, Marshal Reeves. His answering smile was worth every moment of uncertainty she'd felt. Then I'll be sure to take extra care with my recovery. For the next week, Madeline visited Nathaniel daily, bringing home cooked meals and clean bandages. The children accompanied her when they could, James asking endless questions about the gunfight, the girls presenting Nathaniel with drawings and wildflowers. By the time Dr. Miller declared him fit to return to his duties, Nathaniel had become firmly entrenched in their lives. The town noticed, of course. Madeline felt the stares, heard the whispers, but for once, she didn't care. The happiness she felt when Nathaniel looked at her outweighed any discomfort from public scrutiny. On his first day back as marshal, Nathaniel walked the children to school as usual, then escorted Madeline to the laundry. I'd like to take you and the children on a picnic this Sunday, he said, as they reached Mrs. Sullivan's establishment. There's a pretty spot by the creek about a mile out of town. The weather's turning warm and the wildflowers are starting to bloom. That sounds lovely, Madeline replied, trying to ignore Mrs. Sullivan's obvious eavesdropping from the doorway. Nathaniel lowered his voice. And perhaps afterward we might have some time to ourselves. There's something important I'd like to discuss with you. Madeline's heart fluttered. Yes, I'd like that. He tipped his hat, blue eyes warm with promise. Until Sunday then. Sunday dawned clear and mild, the kind of spring day that hinted at summer's approach. Madeline dressed the children in their best clothes, freshly washed and mended, and put on her blue calico dress, the same one she'd worn to dinner that first night, though now it boasted new lace at the collar, a gift from Nathaniel. He arrived at their cabin at noon, driving a borrowed wagon. In the back, Madeline could see a picnic basket and several fishing poles. Thought the children might enjoy trying their hand at fishing, he explained as he helped them into the wagon. The spot he'd chosen was indeed beautiful, a grassy clearing beside a burbling creek, shaded by cottonwood trees and carpeted with blue and yellow wildflowers. The children immediately ran to explore, while Nathaniel spread a blanket on the grass and unpacked the picnic basket. "This is wonderful," Madeline said, watching Emma chase a butterfly while James showed Sarah how to skip stones across the water. "Thank you for thinking of it." "I wanted to give you a day without work," Nathaniel replied, setting out fried chicken, biscuits, and apple tarts. "You deserve it." After they ate, Nathaniel taught the children how to fish, showing infinite patience as lines tangled and bait was dropped. To everyone's delight, James managed to catch a small trout, which they released back into the creek with ceremony. As the afternoon waned, the children grew sleepy from sun and fresh air. Nathaniel suggested they rest in the wagon while he and Madeline walked along the creek. "Are you sure?" Madeline asked, hesitant to leave them. "We'll stay within sight," Nathaniel assured her. "And James is responsible enough to come find us if needed." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, the burble of the creek and the rustle of leaves the only sounds. Nathaniel's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. "This has been a perfect day," Madeline said softly. "It has." Nathaniel stopped walking, turning to face her. "Madeline, there's something I've been wanting to ask you." Her heart began to race. "Yes. These past weeks have been the happiest I can remember. Being with you and the children, it feels right in a way nothing else ever has." He took both her hands in his. "I know it hasn't been very long, but sometimes when you know, you know." "Know what?" Madeline whispered, hardly daring to hope. "That I love you, that I want to build a life with you and the children." He drew a deep breath. "Madeline Cooper, will you marry me?" Joy burst through her like sunshine through clouds. "Nathaniel, are you certain? The children are part of why I love you," he finished for her. "I'm not asking to replace their father. I know Thomas will always hold a special place in their hearts as he does in yours. But I'm hoping you might have room for me too." Tears filled Madeline's eyes. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I'll marry you." Nathaniel's face lit with such happiness that Madeline's heart seemed to expand in her chest. He pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a tenderness that spoke volumes about the man he was. Strong yet gentle, passionate yet respectful. When they broke apart, Madeline was startled to hear cheering. Looking toward the wagon, she saw all three children awake and watching, their faces alight with excitement. "I think we have an audience," Nathaniel murmured, his arms still around her waist. "Should we go tell them?" Madeline asked. "I think they've already guessed, but yes." Hand in hand, they walked back to the wagon where the children waited impatiently. "Are you going to be our new pa?" James asked directly, his young face serious. Nathaniel knelt to meet the boy's eyes. "If you'll have me, yes, but I know you had a father who loved you very much." "I'm not trying to take his place." James considered this. "Pa always said a man's job is to take care of his family. You've been doing that already." "Is that a yes, then?" Nathaniel asked, a smile tugging at his lips. James nodded solemnly, then suddenly threw his arms around Nathaniel's neck. "Yes, sir." Sarah and Emma needed no further encouragement, launching themselves at Nathaniel with squeals of delight. He caught them both, laughing as he included James in the embrace. Watching them, Madeline felt a completeness she'd thought lost forever. They were still poor in material things, but rich in what truly mattered: love, hope, and the promise of a future together. The news of their engagement spread through Cottonwood Springs like a spring flood, bringing reactions that ranged from genuine congratulations to barely concealed disapproval. Mayor Thornton's wife made a point of stopping Madeline on the street. "My dear," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes, "such interesting news. The Marshal is certainly a man of unusual tastes." Madeline lifted her chin. "I consider myself fortunate that he sees value beyond material wealth, Mrs. Thornton." The woman's smile tightened. "Indeed. Well, I do hope you'll be suitable for the position of Marshal's wife. It carries certain social responsibilities." Before Madeline could respond, a voice spoke from behind her. "Mrs. Thornton, beautiful day, isn't it?" Nathaniel stood there, his badge gleaming in the sunlight. Mrs. Thornton's manner changed instantly. Marshal Reeves, yes, lovely weather. I was just congratulating Mrs. Cooper on your engagement. Thank you, I'm the fortunate one. He placed a hand at the small of Madeline's back. If you'll excuse us, I'm escorting my fiancé to look at houses. We'll need more room for our family. As they walked away, Madeline whispered, houses, we haven't discussed that. No time like the present, Nathaniel replied cheerfully. There's a place at the edge of town, 3 bedrooms, good-sized kitchen, small barn for a couple of horses. Owner's moving to Denver and needs to sell quickly. Madeline stopped walking. Nathaniel, I can't let you do this. I have some savings, not much, but Madeline, he interrupted gently, when we marry, what's mine is yours. I've been saving most of my salary for years with nothing much to spend it on. Let me do this for our family. The word family settled around her heart like a warm blanket. Our family, she repeated softly. I like the sound of that. The house was everything Nathaniel had described, weathered but solid, with ample room for all of them and a view of the mountains from the front porch. The children ran from room to room in excitement, already claiming spaces and imagining possibilities. The roof needs some work, Nathaniel noted, and the barn could use new boards in places, but it's sound. It's perfect, Madeline said, envisioning curtains at the windows, a garden out back, children's laughter filling the rooms. They decided to marry in June, when the mountain wildflowers would be at their peak. Madeline had her concerns: the cost of a wedding, her lack of a proper dress, the social implications for Nathaniel, but he dismissed them all. A simple ceremony is all we need, he assured her. And as for a dress, I have a surprise for you. The surprise arrived a week later in the form of a package from Denver, a dress of cream-colored silk, modest yet elegant, with a matching ribbon for her hair. Nathaniel, it's too much, Madeline protested when he presented it to her. Nothing is too much for my bride, he replied. Besides, I had helped choosing it. The girls gave me very specific instructions about what their mama should wear on her wedding day. Madeline looked to her daughters, who were watching with shining eyes. You knew about this, Sarah nodded proudly. Marshal Nathaniel measured us while you were at work, then sent our sizes to Denver too. Sizes? For what? Emma bounced with excitement. For our pretty dresses. We're going to be flower girls. Nathaniel grinned at Madeline's astonishment. James is getting a new suit as well. Can't have my best man looking anything less than distinguished. Best man, James echoed, his eyes widening. If you'll accept the position, Nathaniel said seriously. James straightened his shoulders. Yes, sir, I'd be honored. As the wedding day approached, Madeline found herself busier than ever. Beyond her regular work, there were preparations to make for the ceremony and for moving to their new home. Nathaniel had purchased the house outright and spent his free time making repairs and improvements. The children blossomed under his attention. James shadowed him constantly, learning to hammer nails and measure boards. The girls collected wildflowers to press for decorations and practiced walking sedately down an imaginary aisle. One evening, as Madeline sat mending on the porch of their cabin, Emma climbed into her lap. Mama, she said thoughtfully, remember when those boys were mean to James and Marshal Nathaniel said we were rich? I remember, sweetheart. He was right, wasn't he? We are rich now. Madeline hugged her daughter close. We were always rich in the ways that matter most. But yes, we're blessed with even more riches now. Inside, she could hear Nathaniel reading to Sarah and James an adventure story by the sound of it, his deep voice changing for different characters, drawing delighted giggles from the children. The simple domestic scene filled her with contentment. Later, after the children were asleep, Nathaniel joined her on the porch. Penny for your thoughts, he said, sitting beside her. I was just thinking how much has changed in such a short time. 3 months ago, I was wondering how we'd survive another year. Now. He prompted when she trailed off. Now I'm planning a wedding and a future I never thought possible. She turned to him, moonlight silvering his features. Sometimes I'm afraid I'll wake up and find it was all a dream. Nathaniel took her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. Not a dream. Though I understand the feeling. I've been a wanderer for so long, the idea of home, a real home, with a family sometimes seems too good to be true. Madeline leaned her head on his shoulder. We'll make it true together. The week before the wedding, Nathaniel was called away to escort a prisoner to the territorial court in Denver. He promised to return in 3 days, plenty of time before the ceremony. "Be careful," Madeline said as he prepared to leave. "Always am." He kissed her goodbye, then knelt to embrace each of the children. "Mind your mother while I'm gone. I'll be back before you know it." 3 days passed, then 4, no word from Nathaniel. Madeline tried to hide her worry from the children, but by the 5th day, even they were asking questions she couldn't answer. On the 6th day, a rider came from the south, not Nathaniel, but a young man wearing the badge of a deputy marshal from Denver. "Mrs. Cooper." He asked when Madeline answered her door. "Yes, I'm Deputy Walsh. I've been sent to inform you that Marshal Reeves was injured during an escape attempt by his prisoner. He's recovering at the Territorial Hospital in Denver." The world seemed to tilt beneath Madeline's feet. "Injured? How badly?" "Shot in the shoulder. Doctor says he'll recover fully, but he lost a fair amount of blood and developed a fever. He's been asking for you." "I have to go to him," Madeline said immediately, then hesitated as reality intruded. Denver was a 2-day journey, and she had 3 children and no money for stage fare. As if reading her thoughts, Deputy Walsh continued, "Marshal Reeves anticipated your concern. He arranged for tickets for you and your children on tomorrow morning's stage, and he asked me to give you this." He handed her a leather pouch that clinked with the sound of coins. Madeline stared at the pouch, emotions warring within her. "Thank you, Deputy. Please tell the Marshal we'll be there as soon as possible." After the deputy left, Madeline gathered the children to explain the situation. To her surprise, they took the news calmly. "Marshal Nathaniel is tough," James declared. "He'll be fine once he sees us." "We should bring him something to make him feel better," Sarah suggested. "Flowers," Emma said decisively. The next morning, they boarded the stage with a small bundle of possessions and a carefully wrapped bouquet of wildflowers. The journey was long and uncomfortable, the children growing restless despite Madeline's efforts to keep them occupied. By the time they reached Denver, dust-covered and weary, her nerves were stretched thin with worry. The Territorial Hospital was a surprisingly modern building, 3 stories of red brick with large windows. A nurse directed them to a private room on the 2nd floor, explaining that Marshal Reeves had been moved there from the ward when his fever broke. Madeline paused outside the door, suddenly uncertain. What if his feelings had changed? What if he resented their presence? "Mama." Emma tugged at her skirt. "Aren't we going in?" Taking a deep breath, Madeline knocked softly, then opened the door. Nathaniel lay propped against pillows, his left shoulder and chest wrapped in bandages. His face was pale beneath his tan, his features drawn with pain, but his eyes lit up when he saw them. "You came," he said, his voice rougher than usual. The children rushed to his bedside, their earlier restraint forgotten. Madeline followed more slowly, taking in the medical paraphernalia, the untouched food tray, the Bible open on the side table. "Of course we came," she said, moving to stand beside the bed. "How are you feeling? Better now that you're here." He reached for her hand with his good arm. "I'm sorry about the wedding. We'll have to postpone." "The wedding doesn't matter. You getting well does." Emma thrust her bouquet forward. "We brought you flowers to make you better." Nathaniel accepted them with a smile. "Thank you, sweetheart. They're already working their magic." For the next week, Madeline and the children stayed in Denver, taking rooms at a modest boarding house near the hospital. Each day, they spent hours at Nathaniel's bedside, the children regaling him with stories of their journey and their impressions of the big city. Madeline reading to him from the newspaper or simply sitting with him in comfortable silence. As his strength returned, Nathaniel shared the details of what had happened. The prisoner, one of the stage robbers, had accomplices waiting along the road. They'd ambushed the transport, killing Nathaniel's assistant and wounding him before he managed to shoot 2 of the attackers and drive the others off. Before they escaped, one of them said something that's been troubling me, Nathaniel confided when the children were out of earshot. He mentioned Thornton by name. Mayor Thornton. Madeline was shocked. "You think he's involved in the robberies?" "I don't know, but I intend to find out when I get back." His expression hardened. "These men have killed now. This isn't just about stolen mail and money anymore." By the end of the week, the doctor declared Nathaniel well enough to travel, though he would need several more weeks of rest before resuming his duties. They made the journey back to Cottonwood Springs in stages, stopping overnight to ensure Nathaniel didn't overtax his strength. When they finally arrived home, Madeline insisted that Nathaniel stay at their new house rather than his rented room above the marshal's office. "You need proper care," she said firmly when he protested, "and we're to be married in 2 weeks' time, as soon as the minister returns from his circuit." "What difference does it make if you move in now? People will talk," Nathaniel warned, though his eyes twinkled. "Let them," Madeline replied, echoing his own words from months before. "I'll sleep in the children's room until the wedding. Your reputation will remain intact, Marshal." The arrangement proved beneficial for all of them. The children delighted in having Nathaniel with them full time, and Madeline found that caring for him, changing his bandages, preparing nourishing meals, ensuring he rested adequately came naturally to her. For his part, Nathaniel recovered more quickly than the doctor had predicted, his color returning and his strength increasing daily. True to his word, the minister returned in time to perform their wedding as rescheduled. The ceremony was held on a Saturday afternoon in the town church, with most of Cottonwood Springs in attendance, some out of genuine goodwill, others from curiosity. Madeline wore her cream silk dress, her hair arranged simply with the matching ribbon. The girls preceded her down the aisle, scattering wildflower petals with solemn concentration, while James stood proudly at Nathaniel's side, the ring secure in his pocket. Nathaniel's left arm was still in a sling, but he stood straight and tall in his best suit, his eyes never leaving Madeline as she walked toward him. When she reached him, he took her hand in his right one, his touch steady and warm. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, "we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." The words washed over Madeline like a benediction. As she spoke her vows, promising to love, honor, and cherish Nathaniel for all the days of her life, she felt the last shadows of doubt and fear dissolve. This was right. This was meant to be. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Nathaniel kissed her with such tender passion that several women in the congregation sighed audibly. The children cheered, and even Mayor Thornton, watching from the back pew with an unreadable expression, joined in the applause. The celebration afterward was held in the churchyard, with tables laden with food contributed by neighbors and friends. Mrs. Sullivan had organized it all, proudly announcing that no one worked harder than Madeline Cooper, now Madeline Reeves, and she deserved a proper wedding feast. As the sun began to set, Nathaniel found Madeline watching the children play with other youngsters on the church lawn. "Happy, Mrs. Reeves?" he asked, slipping his good arm around her waist. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied honestly. "And you, complete." He kissed her temple. "Though I'll be happier still when we're alone later." Madeline blushed, but leaned into his embrace. The children were spending the night with Mrs. Sullivan, giving the newlyweds privacy for their first evening as husband and wife. "I never thought I'd love again after Thomas," she confessed softly. "I'm grateful every day that you proved me wrong, and I never thought I'd find a home and family of my own." Nathaniel's voice was equally quiet. "You and the children have given me something I didn't even know I was missing." As darkness fell and lanterns were lit around the churchyard, casting a golden glow over the celebration, Madeline looked around at the community that had once overlooked her family and now embraced them. Her children, laughing and playing without the shadow of worry that had haunted them for so long. Her new husband, strong and honorable, whose love had transformed their lives. The journey from widow to wife, from poverty to security, from isolation to belonging, had been unexpected and swift. Yet Madeline knew that the true riches in her life had been their all-along courage, resilience, love. Nathaniel had simply helped her see what she already possessed and added his own strength to hers. As they said their goodbyes and prepared to leave for their new home, Emma tugged at Nathaniel's sleeve. "Are you our papa now?" she asked, her small face serious in the lamplight. Nathaniel knelt, mindful of his injured shoulder. "If you'd like me to be, yes." Emma nodded solemnly. "Good." "Because you were right." "About what, sweetheart?" We are rich in your name now, all of us." Nathaniel's eyes glistened as he gathered the little girl in a one-armed embrace. "And I'm the richest man in the territory because of it." Over Emma's head, his gaze met Madeline's, full of promise and devotion. In that moment, she knew beyond any doubt that their future together would be abundant with the true wealth of life, love, family, and the joy of building something lasting and meaningful together. The years that followed proved the truth of that wedding day certainty. Nathaniel's investigation eventually revealed that Mayor Thornton had indeed been involved with the stage robberies, using his position to gather information about valuable shipments and passing it to the outlaws for a share of the proceeds. The evidence Nathaniel compiled led to the mayor's arrest and conviction, sending shockwaves through Cottonwood Springs. In the aftermath, Nathaniel was offered the position of sheriff for the entire county, a promotion that came with greater responsibility, but also allowed him to remain permanently in Cottonwood Springs with his family. Madeline supported his decision to accept, proud of his integrity and commitment to justice. Their family grew the following year with the birth of a son they named Thomas Nathaniel, honoring both the father the older children had lost and the one who had chosen to love them as his own. 2 years later, a daughter joined them, Grace Elizabeth, with her father's blue eyes and her mother's determined spirit. The Cooper children, now Reeves by adoption, though they kept Cooper as their middle names at Nathaniel's suggestion, thrived under their stepfather's guidance. James developed his natural affinity for horses into a successful breeding and training business that eventually became known throughout the territory. Sarah fulfilled her childhood ambition of becoming a teacher, returning to Cottonwood Springs after her education to open a school that welcomed children of all backgrounds. Emma, with her artistic temperament, learned to create beautiful things from simple materials, a skill that served her well when she married the local carpenter's son. Through it all, Madeline and Nathaniel's love deepened and strengthened, weathering the challenges that life inevitably brought, drought years that tested the community's resilience. A scarlet fever epidemic that nearly claimed young Grace, Nathaniel's occasional dangerous encounters in the line of duty. Each trial they faced together, their partnership equal and unwavering. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Nathaniel surprised Madeline with a gift, a silver locket containing miniature portraits of all their children, with room for one more. A daguerreotype of themselves, heads close together, smiles reflecting the contentment they'd found in each other. 10 years, Madeline marveled as they sat on the porch of their home that evening, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that you stepped between James and those bullies. "Best decision I ever made," Nathaniel replied, his arm around her shoulders. At 42, his hair was touched with silver at the temples, but his blue eyes were as clear and kind as ever. "Though asking you to marry me runs a close second." Madeline leaned her head against his shoulder, thinking of the frightened widow she had been, washing clothes with raw hands and wondering how she would feed her children the next day. That woman seemed like someone from a dream now, distant and faded. "Do you remember what you said to the children that first day?" she asked. "About them being rich in my name? I remember. It was true then, and it's true now." He kissed her temple. "Though I hope they've come to feel rich in mine as well. They have. We all have." Madeline turned to face him, taking in the beloved features that had become as familiar to her as her own reflection. "Thank you for showing us what true wealth is." Nathaniel's smile deepened, creating the lines at the corners of his eyes that she found so endearing. "And what is that, Mrs. Reeves?" "Love," she said simply. "Family, honor, courage, all the things that can't be bought or sold but make life worth living." Inside the house, they could hear the children, their children, all 6 of them setting the table for dinner, their voices raised in good-natured banter and laughter. The sounds of home, of belonging, of a future built on love's solid foundation. Nathaniel stood, offering his hand to help Madeline up. "Shall we go in? Sounds like our riches are getting restless." Madeline took his hand, feeling the same spark that had kindled between them a decade before. "Yes," she said, her heart full. "Let's go home." Hand in hand, they walked into the warmth and light of the house they had built together, not just the physical structure, but the family within it. A family that had started with a widow and her 3 children, poor in possessions but rich in character, and a marshal who had seen their true worth. A family bound together not by circumstance or obligation, but by the most valuable currency of all, love freely given and gratefully received. In the years to come, Cottonwood Springs would grow and change, as would the Reeves family. But the legacy Madeline and Nathaniel created, one of integrity, compassion, and unwavering devotion, would endure far beyond their lifetimes, enriching generations yet unborn with the inheritance that truly mattered, the wealth of character that no hardship could diminish and no fortune could surpass.